Great team win for the San Francisco Giants last night as they shut out the Dodgers 5-0. They hit, they pitched, they played good defense, and hey, even the manager, who I was critical of on Saturday, managed what I thought was a heck of a game as the Giants beat LA.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And where we get started, is with the fact that the Giants came back after a 9-1 drubbing at the hands of the Dodgers in the first game of the series. Giants come back and play perhaps their best overall game of the season, in which, like I said, they hit, they pitched, they defended, and the manager pulled the right strings. And where I want to kind of start is the decisions that Gabe Kapler had to make, and how they were not easy decisions, but that they were the right ones. And in some cases, some people are going to disagree that they were the right decisions. And to set the stage, the Giants scored a couple early runs in this game. They got off to a 2-0 lead thanks to Jock Peterson hitting a 2-run double, I believe it was, in the first inning. And Alex Wood was on the mound for the Giants, and he didn't have his best command, but he had only allowed one hit and no runs, but he had walked 3 and he had hit 2 batters. And he was in the 5th inning with 2 outs. And so Mike Krukow on the broadcast, old school, obviously, right? He played in a much, I don't want to call him old, but he played a long time ago when these things mattered. Getting the pitcher a win, right? The pitcher getting him a win. Not the team getting a win, but the pitcher. And so pitchers do care about this, and you have to go through 5 innings to qualify for that win. And so it wasn't an easy decision to pull Alex Wood with 2 outs in the 4th inning with a 2-0 lead, but there were 2 guys on, runners on 2nd and 3rd with 2 outs, and they had Jakob Junis ready in the bullpen. And for the Dodgers, it was Will Smith coming up to the plate. And so I'm going to make the case that it was an easy decision to pull Alex Wood, despite the fact that it meant he was going to leave the game with no runs allowed, although the 2 runners on base were his responsibility, and being 1 out away from qualifying for that win. Why? Because Alex Wood, A, he's a left-handed pitcher, and Will Smith is a very good right-handed hitter. So platoon advantage goes to the Dodgers there. B, it's the 3rd time through the order for Alex Wood, which has been a problem for him. And he had allowed 2 base runners already in the inning. And C, that's basically it. That's basically it. And so it's time to go get your righty there regardless. I understand that pitchers care about getting that W for themselves, but the team win is so much more important. And the quicker we can just get pitchers to get over it. I honestly, this is a hot take, perhaps, would be in favor of just getting rid of assigning a particular pitcher the win or the loss in a game. It used to matter. It used to be, that was created so that people could have a clue as to what happened in the game. But these days, we have so many numbers that we can evaluate players. Teams do not give one thought to a pitcher's record when they're evaluating them anymore. It's only really the fans, and particularly, an older generation, that to them it was huge. But to us, in this day and age, it really should mean nothing. And so pulling him was easily the right call. Jakob Junis then faces Will Smith, and Will Smith hits a rocket to right field. So it's like, there's no guarantee that he's going to even get him out. And if he gives up a hit, then it's really easy to second guess. And this is what I mean when I say that managing is hard and you're going to get criticized if the bullpen doesn't do its job. But when the bullpen, you got to judge the decision prior to the results. And in the long run, this is a move that just is the right move. And so it did work out this time. For all we know, Smith could have hit a 3-run homer against Wood. He could have hit a single, tied the game. But they go to Junis and they get out of it. And then later in the game, another excellent decision. And I don't just want to make this about Kapler. It's about the players doing the job too. Like Wood just kind of doing his job, getting them through 4 2/3. Junis doing his job, getting Will Smith out. And then later in the game, Junis is continuing to pitch, but he ends up loading the bases with nobody out. And then there's a righty on the mound with a lefty up next. And they stick with Junis, and he gets a strikeout. I believe it was Chris Taylor. He got him to strike out. And so then with a lefty Outman coming up, and you've got Scott Alexander in the pen, it's the perfect guy to go to in that spot because Scott Alexander, he throws strikes. You don't want someone who's going to walk a guy with the bases loaded and a one-out situation at that point. And he's also just an insane ground ball machine. I mean, Scott Alexander, I am not exaggerating. Career ground ball rate of 70.5%. When the ball is put in play, it's on the ground 70% of the time. League average is about 42. So almost double the rate of the average pitcher in terms of just getting ground balls. And sure enough, Kapler goes to him at exactly the right time, but also the player came through. Alexander threw strikes. He got just a weak little ground ball out in front of the plate, and he charged it, barehanded it, and flipped it home to Blake Sabol for the force out. And at some point, I don't remember if it was to Outman or to the next hitter, there was just an incredible block by Blake Sabol. Again, it's a 2-0 game at that point, and a ball that goes to the backstop certainly scores a run and puts you in a position to, where a single would then put you behind. And so it was a great block, a very difficult block by Sabol, who's not even like a natural catcher, right? So it really impressive there. And then Scott Alexander ends up striking out the next hitter. So just incredible job by the bullpen. And then John Brebbia, Tyler Rogers, and Camilo Doval, who was again a little bit shaky and had a pitch clock violation, but by that point it was 5-0 Giants, and so the stress was off a little bit. But if you're going to criticize Gabe Kapler, you've also got to give him credit when he pulls the right strings, and I think more often than not, he does. And this was a great example. I don't think really you could have managed the pen better than it was managed last night. That's my opinion about it. So coming up in just a minute, more about the offense in this game, and we're also going to get into the Giants' defense. Has it been a problem this year? The answer is no. We'll get into the eye test and the numbers to back it up in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by none other than FanDuel. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back, and there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. I'm looking right now at some of the odds. How about this? The disrespect. The Giants heavy underdogs at home against the Dodgers. I get it. There's a ton of talent on the Dodgers, but as we saw last night, the Giants are capable of winning a game. And tonight with Alex Cobb on the mound for the Giants, Clayton Kershaw, still good, but not the same as he once was, and the Giants have some dangerous righties. We saw David Villar go deep last night. J.D. Davis has been red hot. He'll be in there. And so I'm kind of liking the Giants tonight being underdogs at +138, and even to cover the spread at -128, 1.5 runs with the spread there. And so you can check that out and so much more over at FanDuel, and don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, as promised, more to get into about this game last night. The Giants with a big win. It feels important, especially against your arch rivals who beat you up the previous day and just completely destroyed you in 2022 all season long. Kind of almost single-handedly kept the Giants out of the playoffs. Like if they had played halfway decent against the Dodgers and Padres last year, the Giants probably would have made the postseason. And so important, although there are fewer intra-division games this year, down from 19 in previous years to 13 this year. So the Dodgers are in town now. They literally do not come back to San Francisco until the final series of the season. And so it's crazy. I mean, that's the new schedule. So overall, I just want to mention the Giants are 5-6. They have outscored their opponents by 2 runs, which usually, technically speaking, when you've scored more runs than your opponents, you typically win more than you lose. And so, I kind of blame the one. I think the winnable game was the game in which they had a 5-1 lead in the 7th inning against the Kansas City Royals. That is a game that you should win, I don't want to say 99 out of 100 times, but close to it. I mean, literally, I was looking at the live kind of probabilities of a win in that game, and the Giants were in the mid-90s. And so really, that's a game they let slip away. They really ought to be 6-5 at this point, but they're not. Reality is they're not. But speaking of records, I just want to calm everyone down. Even if the Giants had lost last night and fallen to 4-7, which sounds pretty ugly, you look around the league, the Cardinals are 4-7. And if you don't know, everybody picked the Cardinals to win the National League Central this year. And so they're not the only example. The Pirates are 7-4, and the Pirates are going to finish probably in last place. The Cardinals very well may win the division. The Philadelphia Phillies are 4-7. They went to the World Series last year. No person alive picked the Phillies to finish, behind the Giants in any kind of preseason prediction. And of course, I'm not saying they will based on their 4-7 record. I'm just saying a handful of baseball games, 2 hands full approximately, is not enough to make a determination about a team. The A's are 2-9. That checks out. How about the Mariners? Man, preseason rankings, I really did a show about kind of ranking teams in the preseason, and I thought that the Giants belonged ahead of a lot of teams that other people had ahead of the Giants. I wouldn't say that I would put the Mariners in that category, but people having the Mariners just as a clear top 10 team, I just don't really see it that way. And they're 4-8. Astros are 5-7, and they won the World Series last year and are a very good team. The I don't know. The Rays are 11-0. That's insane. So anyway, it's obviously just Dodgers are only 6-6. It's just too early to make any grand declarations. And right now we're just going game to game and trying to win them. And so the Giants did that last night, and they played good defense and they hit well enough. And for the longest time, they didn't have a lot of strikeouts in this game. But then in one inning late in the game, one of the relievers struck out the side. And so I think they had 4 strikeouts late in the game, and then they ended up with 7. But just up and down the lineup, you've got guys who have good overall offensive performance on the season in different ways. Like Lamont Wade Jr., the hits necessarily haven't been there, but he's getting on base a ton. Just look at that on-base percentage. If you're watching the game tonight, it'll show the average on base and slugging. Look at the on-base percentage and recognize league average is like, I don't know what it is this year. I don't have it pulled up, but last year and in normal years, it's like 315 or so. Might be like 320, 310, somewhere in that range. And he's at like almost 500 with his on-base percentage. Michael Conforto, 2 more walks. Umpire totally... Speaking of strikeouts, I mean, there was a horrible call on Conforto for a strikeout, so it's not always their fault. Like, he really shouldn't have struck out in that plate appearance. J.D. Davis has kind of been a monster, although he was 0 for 4 last night. Jock Peterson, big hit there in the first inning to drive in a couple runs early. That's what, take a lead early. It makes a big difference. Yastrzemski had a couple hits, and David Villar hit his first home run ever at Oracle Park. So this guy has done nothing but kind of hit home runs in his professional career, including in the major leagues. I mean, David Villar, let's talk about him for a second. He now, for the season, this is where, again, same exact kind of story as last year. David Villar has a career batting average of 232. This year right now it's 235. Last year it was 231. What does that tell you? Does it mean he's a below average hitter? Not at all. He's been about 30% above average as a hitter in Major League Baseball. Why? Because he's walked a lot. So he's got a robust 338 on base percentage. What did I just say? League average around 315. He's at 338. So he's getting on base way more than average despite a lower batting average than average. And the power has translated thus far. He's got 3 home runs already this season. He hit 9 last year in only 52 games. So he's played 63 Major League games, which is, it's not 1/3 of a full season, but it's less than half of a season. Okay, let me just start over. He's got 12 home runs in 63 games. So let's just say it was 126 games. That would translate to 24 home runs in 126 games. And so the power plays. I mean, it's just working out in terms of him getting to the power. The strikeout rate this year has come down a little bit so far. Compared to where it was last year, it's only at 26.8%, which is very doable, and a walk rate of 12.2%. So, and defensively, we'll talk about defense in a little bit, but defensively, David Villar has done a nice job, and he's covered at second base too. So the ability to play third and second, and if he just hits, I'm bullish and optimistic. I think it's too early to get too excited about David Villar, but all he's done is hit everywhere he goes. And then he's been a solid defender as well this year. So he hit a home run last night, gave the Giants some cushion, and then Brandon Crawford followed it up on the very next pitch with another home run. And this is a good pitcher. Mind you, a lot of the narrative early in the season is I'm talking people off the ledge when they're saying home runs are not good because you can't rely on them against good pitching. Well, the Dodgers have some pretty good pitching, and the Giants hit a couple home runs against a really good pitcher last night. So that's kind of a false narrative. I would say it's harder to string a bunch of hits together against good pitching than it is to just run into one. And so if you find yourself on base a lot because you walk a lot and you sometimes get your hits mixed in there, and you're a team that's a threat to go deep at any spot in your lineup, that's a good thing. And as a result, the Giants overall have been an above average offensive team this season. And so anyway, it was just a great game all around. The Giants, they didn't score any runs between the first inning and the 8th inning and only had 7 total hits, but the Dodgers are a good team. Dustin May was not at his best. He was not sharp. The Giants were making him work. They were taking pitches that weren't in the strike zone, and that's kind of what's going to define this team. If they're going to have success, especially just being super patient, and then when they get pitches in the zone, punishing them. And just overall, the Giants did everything they needed to do last night, including play defense. Defense was such a problem in 2022. Has it been a problem this year? No, it has not. The eye test and the numbers back it up, and we'll discuss it in just a minute, get into all the numbers. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Ultimate Baseball GM. This is the best game that I've played in a long time. I've always thought that I could be a Major League GM. It was a dream of mine for the longest time. I've since given up on that dream. I love what I do now, but hey, I still want to see if I can do it and put those skills to the test. And in this game, Ultimate Baseball GM, you're able to do so, and it is not as easy as you might think. And I love that because I don't want to just have it handed to me. I want to prove my worth. And we've been competing with, among Locked On hosts, and several hosts have gotten fired from their roles as GM. And so this game will be tough on you if you're not doing a good job. You've really got to stay on top of it. Hiring the right coaches and staff, managing team finances, scouting and drafting players, managing personalities, team chemistry, injuries, just navigating your franchise through free agency and all the ups and downs of a season. Locked On Giants listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in the game store, so make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up on the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com. Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, here we go. We're going to talk about the Giants' defense, the bugaboo. And so far, it's looking like I was correct. But it's only been, 11 games. So it's too early. I'm not going to do a victory lap at this point. I would say it took quite a while last year for us to kind of realize that the defense was a problem. That's the thing about baseball. I'll just throw this out there and I'll keep saying it periodically, that typically it's about 45 games into a season when you can kind of get a really good, when you can give your first real hard analysis of what your team is. So we're 11 games in. We're obviously not there. But so far, defensively, it just hasn't been a problem. And when I say I was right and I'm going to do a victory lap, not yet. I am not declaring victory yet. I kept saying I just think the Giants can be at least a decent defensive team. And what have we seen this year? Forget the numbers for a minute. I know some people are bothered when I just use numbers all the time, but I'm watching every single game for decades. I'm watching the games and looking at the numbers. It's fine to do both. And what are our eyes telling us? Has the defense been a problem? Have they been a perfect defensive team? No. But has the defense been an issue? It has not. They have done the job. Michael Conforto, by the way, made several really nice plays in right field yesterday. And Thairo Estrada, falling over, a line drive was hit so hard, a ground ball line drive, bounced once, and it ate him up. And he ended up on his backside, and he threw the guy out from his backside, deep at second base. And that was a really nice defensive play. J.D. Davis has made good defensive plays. As I said, David Villar has made good defensive plays. Yastrzemski lost one ball in the sun in New York. There was one other kind of sliding play where I didn't think he had a great jump, and he didn't make the catch. But like I said, you're not going to be perfect and make every single play. But for the most part, the defense hasn't been a problem. And I'm simply talking about the eye test at this moment. And so now let's move past the eye test and see what the numbers have to say. Well, there's StatCast outs above average. This is literally looking at StatCast is this camera system, uses, what does it use now? Radar? I don't even know. It's very high tech stuff, very high tech. And it's looking at, where did you start? Where did the ball end up? How much distance was there between you and where it ended up, and how much time happened between when it was hit and when it got there? And they've created this ability to measure an estimated success rate on a play like that. And I mean, on a ground ball, I honestly don't know exactly how they do it, but I know that there's been a lot of thought put into it, and that it's a solid way to evaluate defense, which is hard to do. I mean, fielding percentage, if you have ever heard me say this before, I apologize, but I'm going to say it again. Fielding percentage is just a dreadfully poor way to evaluate a defense. And yet, all the time on broadcasts and whatever, you'll hear people say, the Giants are X, 15th in team defense, and they're talking about fielding percentage. Look, errors matter, and if you're just clanking balls that you should be catching, that matters. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it says nothing about range, which is so important. So anyway, that's why we have to use, if we're going to use some numbers, they've got to be better than fielding percentage. And that's where outs above average, defensive runs saved, and all that comes into play. And for the Giants, they rank 11th right now with +1 out above average. But, tied with a bunch of, +1. The team that's 8th also has +1. The team that's 7th has +2. And so basically they're not at the bottom, which is where they found themselves last year. Right now, the Rockies come in last at -10 outs above average. Again, the Giants at +1. And then by defensive runs saved, the Giants find themselves with +4 defensive runs saved, which ranks 7th in the major leagues. +4. Last year, I believe, by defensive runs saved, the Giants were dead last. By outs above average, they were 28th. But again, it's early. I honestly don't know how many games it really takes for this kind of thing to stabilize, but let's look at some individual players, see if it lines up with what we're saying. Mike Yastrzemski, +3 defensive runs saved. Thairo Estrada, +2. This was a guy who I was going on and on about in the offseason. defensive run save didn't like Thairo Estrada last year, and I'm just saying I see no reason why Thairo Estrada can't be a good defender. And so far, has he been a problem at all? No. I think maybe there was one play he mishandled, but otherwise has been rock solid there. Athletic. I just like his all-around game a lot. David VR, +1 defensive run save. JD Davis, +1. That +3 for Yaz, by the way, is in center, and he's got another +1 in right field. And so looking for any kind of negative numbers here in defensive run saved, we find Brandon Crawford with -2. And yeah, I mean, he did clank a couple of balls that were gettable. Thairo Estrada has -1 at shortstop. I don't want to just go too deep into the weeds here, but suffice it to say, the Giants defense has not been a problem thus far. If there's been a problem, it's been inconsistent offense, strikeouts, certainly. We talked at length about the early season trends for the Giants on yesterday's show. Offensively, it's been inconsistency and strikeouts. And in terms of run prevention, it has not been defense. It's been allowing homers. And I'm very confident that they're not going to continue to allow as many homers as they have. And so that's a good sign, I would say. So if they can keep playing solid defense, then I like their chances. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow, breaking down the important rubber match of this 3-game series with the Dodgers. If the Giants win, back to 500. If they lose, another series loss at home. So a lot kind of hinging on this game from a morale perspective. Last game of the homestand, too. So thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.